Hey there, welcome to White Women Wake Up. I'm Karen.
And I'm Jonelle.
Each week, one of us brings a topic to the table, something we've been wrestling with, reading about, or noticing in our own lives.
And the other reacts in real time. No scripts, no prep, just an honest conversation between a mother and daughter, spanning generations about what it means to wake up as white women in a world shaped by bias, power, and inherited patterns.
We don't always agree, and it's not always comfortable, but we show up anyways.
Yes, we do.
Hey.
Let's wake up.
Hi, Jonelle. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Oh, for our audience, for those of us that are following us sequentially, we did take a break from recording, which was so bizarre.
It was very bizarre.
Yeah, we haven't taken a break the entire year.
No, and it was my fault. I came down with whatever horrible illness was going around this holiday season. It was rough. It took me out for about a couple weeks, and I still have a little bit of sniffle. If anyone can hear it, we were trying to get it out of the microphone. It was being loud when we were testing earlier. But we're better. It's a new year. We're really excited. We just had our 2026 year ahead kind of business meeting, and we are pretty pumped. Karen said something really interesting about last year and then maybe our new goal for this year. So as we talked about before about our bingos, and I will share more about the bingo card and everything for 2026, what I also do, or what we do, is we come up with a word for the year. And we didn't intentionally do that for the podcast, but Karen did something really interesting. She said, I felt like last year was all about amplifying, and this year is about accountability.
Yeah.
And so, we'll still be loose on these words.
And I used a great quote. I created, I don't know, maybe I read it somewhere, but I liked when we were talking, I said one of the things that I think accountability does is it moves us into action. So one of the things, we want to get more active with our listeners.
Yes.
And so we're going to do book clubs and some things ahead of the game that we will announce.
Yeah,
coming
the coming weeks. So look out for emails from us. If you are not part of our email list, please go to whitewomenwakeup.com and subscribe to our emails. But like she said, we'll have some book clubs coming up. We're hoping to have some events this year. And again, kind of move into...
Hopefully, we've written a book, but hopefully we sit down and actually edit the book.
Yeah.
We're finding that to be the hardest.
But we're really hoping, again, we talked about like how we have been so good to keep each other accountable. And I know we've talked a lot on here about how community and finding your person to keep you accountable is really important. And so we really want to bring those habits and what we've been able to do and get done to kind of our community. And so the first way to go about that is definitely our bingo cards. And so those will be launching hopefully within the next week or two. And essentially what we did is we built a bingo card that's a frame of I don't remember. It's probably like 9 or 10 preset bingos that we're going to do, and we're also hoping our listeners will do. And then we gave you also some spaces to fill out on your own there, and we did the same thing. We added some business stuff within our bingo. But the intention around this is to keep you accountable, do things with us so you really feel like we're all growing together. And then we have a fun prize. Karen, do you want to announce what we think the prize will be for bingo?
Yeah, I do. We decided that the prize would be whichever listener, or how many listeners, we don't know, filled it out and did it, we would feature them in our December podcast of this coming year.
So not just
as a reflection, as a guest.
So not just a feature.
Yeah.
Like we want you to be a guest on our podcast.
Yes.
And 7, we want to hear about all the amazing things you did over the year. So I don't know, to be honest. I didn't even finish my bingo card last year. I got close. So it might be we have a deadline and people just submit what you've done, and the person who's done the most on their bingo card, wins the prize. But it is good because I already forgot about some of the goals that I had set for myself. And then when we went back and reviewed it, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. One of the things that I keep doing, and I know that you do this as well, but for those of you who are just joining us, it's like, what are we doing here? Yes.
And honestly, what I believe our goal is to look at our biases, look at our prejudice, look at our inherited culture, interrogate that. What I mean by interrogate is not to beat ourselves up or shame ourselves, but to actually put wisdom towards it and critical thinking and look at intent. And we want to do that in a way that, I know from many BIPOC females, they're asking us to educate ourselves instead of coming up to them and saying, hey, can you teach me about white bias? And so we're really working on that together. And I think we're moving and we're growing, and it won't be there'll never be an end product. It'll always be a journey. And yet, so that's what we're trying to do together.
You reminded me, and I forgot to share this during our kind of business meeting. We got a Spotify Wrapped for creators, and I forgot to share it with you because there were some really fun facts in there about there are some listeners in Ghana. Ghana is like the number 3 country that listens to us on Spotify.
Wow, that's really exciting. If you're one of those listeners, please email us at hello@whitewomenwakeup.com.
We also had some other fun facts that I'll have to look up for, like we were in, 91%, top 91% of podcasts that got comments or things like that. So anyways, everyone, thank you. It's been a really fun year of engagement and conversations, and we hope we can bring it to the next level.
Yeah. Speaking of engagement, I thought it was really fun over the holidays. Several persons, and again, their friends and family and things, are really listening to us.
Yes.
And, you and I don't see ourselves as experts. We're just creating space for
these learn, not
conversations. And yet our friends are really, these people that are listening on a regular basis have really encouraged us. So thank you to them. They know who they are. We really appreciate you.
Yeah.
And so, let's begin.
We can't do this without you. So on that note,
you're up
today. Oh, okay. This topic, I have to preface with, I have a couple lines here because I really have to preface, because if I don't explain this topic well, it sounds a little hypocritical from who I was last year. And so today I want to talk about the male loneliness epidemic. But and I know, as someone who said they don't want to center men, they don't want, this could be a big transition.
Yeah.
I think what I want to engage on is a different perspective on the male loneliness epidemic that I think will be helpful to our audience.
Okay.
So, want to clarify, this is not an empathy episode for men. This is about a clarity episode for women. Men are not the victims of patriarchy. They uphold patriarchy. Patriarchy harms them.
Yeah, it does.
But it is more harmful, and that harm rebounds onto women. And so this is kind of what I want to talk about in general. But before we get into some of my stuff, let's just take a vibe check. What have you heard about the male loneliness epidemic? What are your thoughts? Let's just go from there.
Well, I guess, as a mother of a white man and as a wife of a white man, I think for men, I think if they're not major sports people, that for one ends up being a place of buddiness. If they're not, my husband has never been interested in volunteering a lot. He's interested in people. He loves people. He'll walk the dog, and he's the first one to get groups of friends. But I know for me, places of volunteering end up being a place where I end up meeting people on a regular basis. And so he's just not a clubs guy or a volunteer.
Yeah.
And so I think for him, he can be really lonely, and he does if I'm the one that, keeps him company.
Yeah.
And so, although I wouldn't call my son lonely, and he has different ways of having engagement, and but most of his engagements are through work. So I would definitely say I think there is a loneliness aspect, especially if you don't have a significant partner.
Yeah. I think the way your perspective came about is exactly why this topic has been irking me for a while. I think because you you lean on the individual men in your life and how, you can see the loneliness. You as a caring mother, a caring wife, want to take away that pain for them. And I think your response is a very common response for white women because they're seeing it from the individual standpoint and where it's been.
Interesting, yeah.
It's where it's been an effect on me and where I get really frustrated about this topic and why I'm taking a new perspective is because then the media has turned to single women as the blamer. As single women, we are the blamed because our expectations are too high for men. Men need love and support, and we are not filling that gap for them because more men are single. It's a female's problem because they don't want kids, they don't want. And so I've always been really frustrated by this commentary because that is really like the male loneliness epidemic centers men as victims in this epidemic. And it's interesting. We've talked a lot about the importance of words in this. And I think the wording of this, again, goes towards your empathy towards the men in your life.
Yeah.
And it doesn't actually really, though, highlight the true issue. And the true issue is that we actually have an emotional labor epidemic.
Yeah.
The problem is we are not teaching people proper emotional labor. The patriarchy doesn't give the same outlet to men to build emotional literacy as it maybe had in the past.
Yeah.
But instead, it's another way of we're putting the onus on women and victims to men. And so this has kind of been before we get into that, 'cause that has been my hardcore position. Sounds anti-man, and that's not my intent. It's more frustrated as
I think you also
I feel like I'm really affected being someone single, trying to find men who just have some semblance of emotional literacy, to add to my life. And because of that, it is very, very hard and harmful, and it's hard to empathize with men in this. Until I heard something that kind of, again, gave me a new perspective. But what did you say before?
I just think it's so interesting because even when you talk about the language of male loneliness, is it, like you said, is it male loneliness or is it this emotional empathy or this
emotional literacy epidemic?
Emotional literacy. Because I'm now seeing it across the board with all of my students, especially as we've moved into COVID. My students, their way to engage with one another is just, it's lost.
Yes.
And I'm really, that's become a big primary goal of mine is to talk about engagement. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting you say that. So the statistics say that men and women actually report equal levels of loneliness.
Yeah.
They say on average about 16% of people report themselves as extremely lonely, both men and women. It is an equal share. Yet, men are having less and less close friends. So there has been a decline in close friends by 12% since 1990 for
men.
So for men has noted that they have not a lot of close friend groups. And then 20% of single men, they say, have no close friends. And so there are some differences, but men aren't necessarily, they're lonelier than ever, but they're not lonelier than women is the thing. And so
you're frustrated with the message.
This is the message. And so I think the interesting part is if we don't have the right message, we can never come with the right resolution.
Yeah.
And so what shifted my perspective instead of just being frustrating about this is I heard a story from a trans man on TikTok who before
is the person a male now?
Yeah, they're a trans man.
Okay.
So they're a trans man. And, and this was before, as they were transitioning, the male loneliness epidemic, this has been a conversation for pretty big in the last year or two. But
actually,
for
the male loneliness,
years.
I was going to say, I think what you're talking about, I mean, women have been talking about their husbands being isolated and lonely for a long time.
For a long time.
But
historically, not true. Historically, up to a third of American men belong to frats.
Yeah.
Previous to this. Man's character was his ability to be strong. And so therefore, when there became a stigma around holding hands and gayness, men naturally turned away. It was common in the 19th century for men to write letters saying, "My lovely boy," or "I'm very affectionate to you." These were common threads between men, between two men.
Yeah.
So male friendship actually hasn't always been. They said the three biggest changes in recent history of what led to the
The lessening
The
of
lessening
friendship.
of friendship among men was the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
Men became more competitors and not companions.
Wow.
So capitalism started
And that's
coming in.
100 years of learning a behavior.
Yep. Then there was the Cold War. Male closeness was thought as suspicious communist behavior.
Oh, interesting.
And then finally in the 80s with the AIDS epidemic, fear of homosexuality drove men away from emotional intimacy and partnership for fear that they would be lumped in to a feminine context and like being friends.
And I wonder if we, it's funny, this is centering on men because that's not your goal.
But that's not my goal.
Your goal is actually really about how this is being blamed on women.
Yeah, and we'll get back to that.
But I do want to say something. I wonder if also part of it is this idea of men have always bonded differently than women, and in a way, as like, was their way of bonding looked down on, or I don't know. I don't know. Because it was always through kind of like, it is interesting that you talked about competitive, because I think that's why my husband bonds with women more than men, is he's not competitive. And he finds it very difficult in a male environment to have male friends when they're always going, I'm stronger, I'm bigger, I'm taller, I'm faster. And he doesn't care about those things.
Well, and it is interesting because, again, TikTok has always brought to light all of the differences and also our similarities amongst humankind. And there was this trend going around where this guy friend said his girlfriend was telling him about how, guys only know football, like they sit there and they don't really talk to each other. And he thought to himself, like, oh, that's odd kind of thing. Like, I want to test this theory. And so he went to his friends and he asked his friends sorts of personal questions that any woman, even a not even a close friend, would know. So the first one was, I've been dating a girl for over a year. What is her first name?
And they didn't know.
They didn't know that.
These were close friends.
When is my birthday?
Yeah.
Didn't know that. They knew like roughly maybe the season. He was asking all of these very generalized things, and it became very clear, wow, they actually don't know. And again, and it's not that his friends don't love him, they don't care. It's a different way of showing it. They've been like culturally shown friendship is around sports. It's around competition. It's not around personal things. And this is where we see like men like Dad, or a lot of men or modern men have gravitated towards female connections, but that also can get...
Well, I think this is linking to your blame, though.
Yes.
Because if one of the ways that, and we're just generalizing because all men are different, as we know, but if one of the ways that men develop emotional intelligence is by interaction with women. Gosh, and I was going to say, this is... Does it relate to more women going back to work in the 70s? I mean, I don't know.
Possibly, and women now having, other things. But it is.
Yeah.
The point is, it's put all of the labor on us. It's given men the excuse to opt out of emotional labor because women are the experts in this.
Well, and women, I wonder if they didn't need it before because they had friendship in a different way.
Yeah.
And honestly, to be honest, you can talk to a lot of guys that still work in a male-dominant field, and they have a lot of bro friends.
Yeah.
Because there's male dominance in those spaces.
But it's not what they're finding, but it's still not creating because it's bro as in competitive.
Yeah.
It's not creating the closeness that men once felt through camaraderie of a frat per se, or some of these other gatherings. But anyways, I want to get back to what kind of switched, and then where I think it's good for us to think about this, us as women, white women. So what switched my mind is, again, this creator, this trans man, talking about how insanely lonely he is since he transitioned. And again, I want to be clear for anyone out there who is not pro-trans, which is a very different story, or I don't want to say pros, but is against trans people. This is not him saying that he is disappointed in transition. He is still very happy with his transition. He just was shocked to actually find how truly lonely it was as a man, because he cannot connect with men as he was so used to connecting with women. And so this is what spun my thing of, again, spun this whole topic. That's what transitioned
That kind of inspired your thinking.
It did kind of inspire my thinking as opposed to being annoyed with them. I still don't think they're victims, but hearing someone from the other side being like, no, it's really bad. Like a lot of them don't know what's going on. Like a lot of them just can't create these relationships like women can, kind of thing. And so I say all this as a white person because, like you said, you read it up earlier, so it's become it's on us. It's become all the weight on their shoulders for women to help resolve this. And I think a lot of women are kind of saying, we can't anymore. We're exhausted. It's not our job. Like,
it's funny. I can relate that to Black women saying, hey, white women, it's not our job to educate you on our feelings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is exactly where I wanted to go, is this is the same kind of analogy out there as men are asking for women. Like as white women might not understand why BIPOC women are so exhausted. Maybe looking at this can help them understand a little bit more of why these women are so exhausted, of educating us. It's the same weight we're putting on their shoulders as these men are putting on our shoulders. And it's not to say that we don't want the men in our life to grow, to change, but it's again about we want them to take the ownership. We know, like no longer saying, oh, well, it's not natural to men. No, it is natural to human beings to be empathetic.
And to be connected.
And to be connected. And so it kind of, in my mind, is this making sense or am I going too far on a tangent?
Well, it's interesting. I kind of so if I hear you correctly, tangents are my specialty, so don't worry about me. I know when I go on tangents, it's a little bit more difficult for you. But okay, so if I hear you correctly, you got inspired about this idea that there's a high epidemic of lonely men. I
didn't get inspired. It sparked me to be more empathetic.
But then it also made you do the research, and the research actually shows that males are not more lonely than females right now. Loneliness is just an epidemic for both male and females.
Yes.
And yet you also did research that said men are blaming women for their loneliness because they want to, in a way, learn what women have or want to be taught emotional intelligence or this emotional connection. Well, and it goes back. It's funny. So I'm trying to think about, like, what have I learned since I've had to, I'm trying to educate myself and I'm trying to learn about what does it mean to look at my biases, look at my inherited patterns. And so one of the things that I think I've had to do, or I know I'm not an expert at it, but this idea of listening to someone's story from where they're at. And is this something, and I don't want to, this is generalizing and I hate to do this, but is this something that men aren't necessarily trained to do? So for example, Jonelle, tell me your story and I'm going to believe your story from your point of view. Like we saw in Barbie, the movie Barbie, that there were so many nuances related to women in that story. And I don't think any men in my life said, hey, can you explain that? None of them. They didn't. They just, there was a sense that they didn't need to know. And so
what they knew was good enough.
Or irrelevant to their growth. So is that the way we've approached BIPOC women? As a white woman, have we said, oh, I'm not willing to listen to your story? Or if I do listen to your story,
I don't know if I believe it.
I don't know if I believe it. Or I don't even know if it's relevant. To me,
exactly.
Or if it's not relevant to me, is there something I can learn from it? Or can I just value it for the sake of valuing it?
So
oh my gosh, that's so interesting.
Is it?
It's an interesting connection.
And so I think twofold, what I kind of wanted out of this topic is, one, the big aha moment that hopefully white women would connect of, even when you're trying your best, the emotional labor you're still putting on BIPOC women to become an ally. And again, there's a spectrum of people who are good and bad. I think, like explaining, having people say not all white women, I'm feeling attacked, or like, be patient, I'm just learning, all of those types. Oh, I'm one of the good ones.
Yeah.
All of those,
Yeah.
like centering your own tears, all of those things, hopefully people can now relate a little bit more
Yeah.
of when they're hearing similar things from men. Oh, like, I'm feeling attacked, or like,
Yeah.
not all men, you're being too emotional. Like, oh, feminism is just too much kind
Yeah.
of thing,
Yeah.
like, don't, like, be my therapy instead of
Yeah.
going to therapy.
Yeah.
All of those centering their hurt
Well,
feeling.
Well, and I can totally hear what you just said about be my therapy instead
Yes.
of having my own therapy. It does take work, and it does take work, especially when someone doesn't guide you. Like,
Yes.
one of the ways that we've had to do a lot of work is simply listening to different stories. I mean, reading different books, getting different perspectives, and opening our hearts to different perspectives.
Yes.
Because I remember what started our argument. I didn't believe that white women ruined feminism. I thought feminism was a good thing, but it turns out it was a good thing for white women.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think in the same way that, again, white women might ask a BIPOC person, can you recommend me books? It's the same way as a man will point me into what I should do next.
Yeah.
And the reality is, I want to kind of, again, so there was the point of recognizing the like similarities in our behavior and men's behavior. But we are empathetic beings. How can we still help break down? How can we help our individual men that we care about and hopefully start breaking down some of these systematic patriarchal patterns without doing the emotional labor? So that's the other thing that I kind of want to give tips on.
I heard you, and can I say one thing? So
totally.
I think, and I don't know, again, it's projecting, which I have a tendency to do.
It's fine.
But when you made that comment, like, we're using this as a metaphor for white women with BIPOC females, but males.
I didn't say metaphor.
Not a metaphor, but a kind of a symbol, a similarity. Yeah, sorry. So if a white man came to me and said, I want to grow my emotional intelligence, do you recommend any books? And I'd love to, but I honestly wouldn't trust that they would hear it from my point of view. And so I'm curious if that's the same response a BIPOC woman would have towards me. Like,
I'm sure.
And maybe initially they were excited, but then I never actually shared in their perspective, or I didn't understand it. And so anyways, I think your comparison is really interesting.
But this is the exact emotional labor and the stages of emotional labor we talk about for women of color. Because there's definitely women of color who come along who are like, okay, I'm willing to help. I want to support. But then slowly, white women erode their trust because maybe they don't actually do the reading. Maybe they don't actually
Or if we do the reading, we never say, hey, tell me your perspective.
Yeah, or we don't actually believe their perspective. And so it does erode the truth or the trust. And I think women can feel very similar with a lot of men in their life. Like, okay, men come to them, tell me, I can do it. I can change. I can go to therapy. I can do all these things. But then yet eventually you're not seeing the change. So I think wherever you are in this stage with, again, I think our first internal reflection is, again, it's a great place to internally reflect when you are asking something or how you view your allyship with BIPOC people. I think that's the first stage.
I think the first stage, wait, hang on a second. I think what aroused this for you was the idea that you were being blamed.
Yeah.
And that was an arousal. And so the thing is, if we are blaming someone else for our lack of growth or our journey, I think that should be a trigger. You know what I mean? That should be a trigger because it really triggered you that you're like, wait, I didn't do anything wrong here. I have my own issues with being lonely, and now don't tell me it's my fault that you're lonely. So if you feel that a person of color or someone with a different sexual orientation, if you feel that if you're blaming them for your lack of knowledge, then that should be a trigger that something is telling you got to go do the work.
Yes.
You got to go reach out.
You got to go do the work.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of where I wanted to wrap it up with a couple things about like reframing some things, just like men are lonely too. And then the reframe is we all feel equally lonely. They just don't do anything about it and stuff. That's the men who are saying they're lonely. They're not doing anything. They weren't taught how to do this like women were. And so then the reframe is it's not women's job to teach an adult male. They, again, need to take ownership over it. But some of the things that I kind of want to talk about, though, more reframing around, so with support without rescuing. I think this is the biggest thing as a white women. We tend to rescue, especially our men. We like to, or people in our lives, we love to rescue. We love to fix it. And so, like, it is about stepping back. Like, if you really want change to happen, believe they can do it.
Yeah.
History proves men can be emotionally connected. There has been plenty of time in history to show that of male friendships.
So in the same connection to us in our topic, history shows that we as white women can expand and transform our point of views. Is that what you're saying?
That's not, I was not connecting those because history has not shown that white women are
But
kind
the thing
people.
is, this is what you are trying to do in this episode is connect that comparison to us.
I am, but I feel like there's 2 points.
But okay,
I'm
so
trying
maybe
to do that,
listening.
But I also want to help women dismantle their patriarchy. That was just a side point of connecting.
Okay.
I also still want to clarify, this is an issue, but the issue affects women more than it ultimately does men.
Yeah.
Men are lonely, but the burden is placed on us. And so therefore, in order to help do this, or what you can is support without rescuing.
Yeah.
Again, you can point them towards resources. You're not the resource yourself. You can model, but don't manage. So make sure you're a teacher, but not his therapist, not his mother, or you're not his teacher. And then name the system. I think this is a big one. The way we were raised, so the way you were raised cut you off from connection. Healing is your responsibility. And so I think really naming the systems and identifying the systems to men to make them more aware. I think that there's a couple great podcasts out there. Oh God, what is it called? It's called pink pilling. I think I've talked about this before. But pink pilling is husband and wife, and essentially the wife just brings up topics that men have never even had to think of.
Oh, that's
like anything from pink tax around, women's products. You look at razors, you look at shampoo, you look at things. Women products are always more expensive, even if they're not necessarily more expensive to make. They bring up all sorts of topics that men have like never even really thought about. And so that's a great educational tool just to get men thinking about that. I think, even little things, even in our schools, how we don't really teach the men around like women periods and how they're going to deal with them.
Yeah, they usually go in a separate room.
They hide it from them. And so I think there's a big lack of understanding of like truly how this affects a woman's day-to-day life. So things of that sort. So anyways, my 2 points today were just really about, it's just flipping the script on the male loneliness epidemic and really recognizing like how this is impacting on women, even though we are looked at as not the victims, I guess.
Yeah. And
then also really then how can it help transition like our thought process on how we engage with BIPOC women in our community.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of like being in the middle here. When someone is blaming you and then we're blaming someone else, and all of it is this ability and this willingness to step into reframing your narrative, reframing your learning patterns so that you can hear that and being open to learn. I think that that's a really big thing. Open to other people's stories of who they are and trusting their story. And we've talked about that a lot.
Yeah. So a couple reflection questions is, have you ever been someone's only emotional outlet? So that's an interesting one to kind of think through. But in the same respect, what would it look like to hold ourselves to the same standard we're asking men to meet?
Meaning what?
In the perspective, what would it look like to hold ourselves accountable to how we engage with people of color?
Yeah.
In the same way, you're right, that question is kind of funky.
Yeah.
I think I'm more meaning it as, I did not edit this question well. More is if we are expecting if we expect the same growth in men,
so
and
they're
maybe this is more
teaching
my
themselves,
thing. If we're
talking to other men about their loneliness.
How do we hold ourselves accountable, or vice versa? If you already are holding yourself accountable, how can you help the men in your life hold themselves accountable?
And I think some of the things that I've heard, in particular with BIPOC people, is this like passive white women tend to be nice at all costs. They're nice in a negative way, not where it's authentic way. They tend not to be authentic and tell truths.
I hate to say it, everyone. We gotta. I cut you off, but it's because our systems just cut us off.
Anyways,
great
topic.
Thanks for joining us on White Women Wake Up. We hope today's conversation sparked something in you, whether it's a reflection, a new question, or a deeper commitment to showing up with empathy and accountability. If you found this episode meaningful, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. You can also connect with us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Substack, or whitewomenwakeup.com. We'd love to hear your thoughts and keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious, be open, and keep waking up. Bye.
Who's the one that requested us be on YouTube?
Gianna. Dang it, Gianna. She said we'd go viral. Just kidding. In keeping with this year's message about accountability, we are going to do a new section called Playback, where after each episode, we clarify where we got our research and our citations. So for today's episode on equal loneliness, the Pew Research Center published a study in January 2025, surveyed over 6,000 adults, and found that 16% of Americans feel lonely most of the time. Here's the key that I shared. This is an equal share of men and women in that data. So this male loneliness epidemic framing, the data doesn't actually support that men are lonelier. Second, on males' friendships. The Survey Center of American Life, which is a project out of the American Enterprise Institute, found in 2021 that 15% of men report having no close friends. That's up from just 3% in 1990. And for single men, that increased to 1 in 5. So 20% of single men say they have no close friends at all. Then the third fact I shared. This is an important nuance, but more recent Pew data from 2023 shows that the gap is shrinking around 9% of men and 8% of women who report no close friends, which again strengthens our point earlier that the epidemic framing is overblown and the real issue isn't men are lonelier. Both genders are equally lonely.